What's up, guys? Ben here, bringing you another video today. We're at the end of our champs preview video, and we have the final two teams, probably the biggest franchises, brands in Call of Duty, and they were seeds 1 and 2 going this event. I think they both have had kind of different journeys during Major 5. Neither team, I think, was super happy with how it ended, but I think one was probably a little bit more optimistic than the other. So let's talk about, we're going to start with OpTic Texas, and then we're going to close out with Atlanta FaZe, as those are your final two teams we got a preview coming into the Las Vegas champs event later on this week. So here are the champs standings, the CDL point standings to finish the season. Obviously, top 8 made it to the event. We've covered pretty much everybody on here except for OpTic and FaZe. And at one point, I thought it was probably good value that OpTic might, sneak that #1 spot from FaZe if they were in the grand final with each other. It was a good chance based on tiebreakers that OpTic would have clutched up there and won. Instead, OpTic actually got kind of lucky with their tiebreaker over New York to hold this second seed. It would have given them a little bit more of a favorable matchup, and we'll get to that in a minute. But let's start with OpTic. Let's talk about their journey so far this season. So we've talked a lot about the OpTic Gaming, or the OpTic Texas rather. I got to make sure I don't make that mistake, or Hector's gonna kill me again. There's a funny story from my esports engine days about a time I emailed him. It didn't capitalize the T, and he was very mad. Anyway, Vanguard was an interesting year for OpTic. Obviously, they did really good in Major 1. They looked great online in Major 2, and then Illy's hand started hurting, and they had Prolude in. They brought Illy back, and they got 4th at champs, and it was just a mess. And they decided to make a change, and then they didn't make a change. And then, I don't know what's going on there. They decided to run it back, and it really didn't work at the beginning of the season. They didn't make it to the weekend, losing to Florida. There was then the conversation of what's going to happen with the team. They were going to pick up Fred, maybe. Dashy was on the team, then off the team, then on the team. And basically what happened was at one point Scump retired during the Major 2 cycle, and you ended up with the team of Shotzi, Illy, Hook, and Dashy to play that event. They got 4th, which is really not too bad, all things considered, considering they just made changes. But they decided to make one more change, in their final change so far of the season, dropping Illy to the bench and picking up Dan Ghosty from a challenger squad that did a lot of work at Boston. And they've been pretty good so far online. They've been one of the best teams, if not probably the best team online at the sort of back half of this season. Unfortunately for them, they've had a couple of second places. Second at their home event in Texas, and then second at Major 4, losing to LA Thieves. Major 5 is where things get interesting. They were looking great online, and going into Vegas, they were, I think, the clear favorite to win that event. And then they went to Vegas, they went to Toronto, and they got 3-0, 3-0. Didn't win a single map, didn't look competitive in any of the 6 maps, and probably one of the more perplexing kind of online to land performances we've ever seen in the CDL. And it kind of puts me in a position of, I'm not really sure what to expect with this OpTic team going into this final event of the season. I think, look, if you look at OpTic stats, they're mostly pretty good so far this season. Hardpoint, I mean, they were at one point sort of the best hardpoint team this season, and maybe cooled off a little going in this final event, but they've just got such a deep hardpoint map pool, and the only map they don't play is Embassy, but they'll square up on anything else. S&D, listen, at points this season, S&D for them was a little iffy. They got a lot better at it. I think with Dan, the team, they started to expand their S&D map pool. They weren't really looking good on Embassy S&D, but they now end the season, or go towards the end of the season, with a positive record on that map. And they'll play a CeeLo on occasion. I don't think it's their preferred map. Like, they like Fortress. They like the gamble on there. They'll play Embassy these days, Hotel, Mercado. Like, they've got a great split there. The one game mode for OpTic that this season has still been a little bit tricky for them to figure out has been Control. Obviously, you see the 1 and 5 on Fortress. You take that out, and they're still kind of about a sub 500-ish or around 500 Control team. They lost a lot of game 5 controls, and I think that was sort of poor decision making from them. In a couple of those series, like, they could have played Hotel or CeeLo and just chose because they were the team to pick to play Fortress. And I just don't think that was sort of a wise decision. They got really decent at Expo, so I'll give them that. So I don't think their control map pool is horrible going this event, but I also don't think they're like as strong of a control team as, say, like Toronto Ultra is at the game mode. And for OpTic, it's been interesting with the matchups. They've owned FaZe all season, absolutely dominated them, 5-0 record. Toronto has given them troubles, and they've obviously lost them in a final. They've had Boston's number, and we'll circle back to that in a minute, as that is their winners round matchup at champs. 2-1 against New York. The series have been close. Surprisingly, 1-2 against Rocker, although I will say one of those losses was the SAE Chiefs, so we got to keep that in mind. They did have a loss to Vegas, but you know, Vegas play up and down to people, so that's understandable. 3-0 against Seattle, which I think is interesting as well. And then this is sort of their sort of weakest opponent is Thieves. All the series have been really close. You see they played 7 times, won 11 maps, lost 19. One of those has been in a final. But you see kind of where I talk about the control issues with this team. 1-7 in controls against Thieves has been kind of the sort of difference between these two teams in their matchups. Again, we talk about how good this team was online this season. 19-5, I think, is probably the best online record of the season. I'd have to double check that, but it's got to be up there. And you see like the 21-9 S&D, the hardpoint record's really good. To land the hardpoint record's about the same. Some struggles in search, but we'd have to dive in particular to sort of take Major 1 and Major 2 context away from the back end of the season. We'd have to talk about specifically the new team. I will say, even on land this year, and this is even including sort of Major 4 and Major 5, the control hasn't been as good as they've been online. So keep that in mind as we head to the final event of the season. That's like my key focus for this team. We take a look at the win modes by game in a series. You see, I mean, they're really good in the front end of series. And they got a very good Game 5 record this year. 9-3 in Game 5s. Well, they are 4-8 in round 11s this season. They are 9-17. That's insane, by the way. 9-17 in round 5 controls. That's something, man. That's something. But overall, like, I think control is just really the one thing that is a struggle for this team. And they've had a number of sweeps and they've gotten swept a few times. But I like kind of where this team is at with everything other than Game 3. They just got to handle the momentum around it, or maybe they put in a lot of work and now they're really dominant and good at the game mode. All right, so let's take a look at some individual stats. I think, look, for me, 2 players I think having the best season are Shotzzy and Dashy. Both of them have been stellar in pretty much every game mode and are both going to be in either the MVP or the fringe of the MVP or definitely the all-star conversation for both. I mean, you see the hardpoint stats. Shotzy's a 107, Dashy a 1.1. I mean, for subs, a 107 is really good. The 1.1 is great for an AR. And it's not like both these guys are just kind of cheesing it, playing slow. You see that they're active. You see that they're getting a lot of hill time. Like, their contribution to their team is amazing in the game mode. And as far as search goes, I got to tip Shotzzy. In this season with the 103, he looked really uncomfortable in S&D during Major 1 and Major 2. And he really has turned it around near the middle of the season in this game mode. Dashy as well has been stellar in search, but he's always been pretty good at search in his career. So no surprises there. And then you look at control again. They've had a bunch of control struggles, and it seems like a lot of that is coming to Game 5. But Dashy and Shotzzy both slayed well in that. You might see the 31.4 engagements for Bruce and say, what's up with that? We've talked about this a lot with control. If you are sort of the full-time AR player, sometimes you're blocking the small end, especially on like a hotel control. So you may not necessarily be getting in the mix because no one's really coming towards you to go get those kills because you're just kind of holding a position to spawn a team on the other side of the map. I think, to me, the biggest X factor in this team is Hook. So to really demonstrate this, because I think Major 5 stats are really ugly, and I don't really want to use them because I got 6-0'd. It's just, everybody got smoked. I think that Hook is the X factor because let's look at the stat performance between online and LAN for this team during Major 4. So online, you see they were all frying. Everybody's got like close to a 1-1. Some of these games. Who got a 2.14 in 5 S&D maps online during stage 4 is wild. But you see when we go to Major 4, there's definitely a difference in the contribution from Hook. He's dropping a 0.98 in hardpoint, a 0.83 in search, 106 in control, still pretty good. My concern with this team, especially Hook's playstyle, is they are very aggressive. They take a lot of ego challenges. They're in your face. They're always running. I think this team needs to sometimes slow it down, play more corners. And what I was really concerned about watching them in Major 5 is that when they weren't getting the kills and constantly putting pressure and they had to break hills in hardpoint or break control points, like the teamwork was just really poor. They're taking a lot of single chows. So they need to rely more on their bait and switches and their trades when they get to land. I think Hook is sometimes the worst offender of this because he's sort of like a very much a roam rogue player. And I think online with the sound EQs, you know, they're able to play that play style better. It's a lot harder to do on land. I'm not calling Hook some sound EQ cheeser, by the way, so idiot people in the comments don't say that. I'm just saying that when you get to land, you can't rely on the sound cues to make the right decisions. You got to actually like take map control as a team a little bit more. I think this is where like a team like FaZe has gotten really good at hardpoint now because they've sort of understood this, and I feel like teams like Toronto have been good at it all season. Even a team like Seattle has been good at it. I think OpTic at times have struggled with this. So want to see them turn this around when they get to Major 5 because, you know, these were their stats in the 6 maps. It's not great. Everybody got smoked. You can't look at this and say, well, one person in particular played bad, because candidly, they all played bad. And I just don't think that they can go to LAN again and get 6-0'd. All right, so here's the bracket for OpTic. They're on the bottom side. They're going to play up against Boston in the first round. Mind you, this is Boston with Snoopy. So I have no idea. This is one of the matchups that I have no idea what to expect. I could see this one being a really gritty, like game 5, but classically Boston is going to find a way to lose that. I think OpTic wins, but it could be either really clean from them or really sketchy. I just don't know. OpTic's a wild card. Where it gets interesting then is they're likely going to play New York in the next round. And I think right now, based on sort of New York's form in Major 5, OpTic's form in Major 5, I think I might take New York in that matchup. I think. We'll have to see how teams play on the first day to maybe change our mind there, but win or lose, I still like OpTic's chance to go deeper in this tournament. Here's the problem if they lose this matchup though. They're going to play someone from the top side. It's probably going to either be FaZe, Toronto, or LA Thieves. So in order for OpTic to get top 4 at this event, they're going to either have to beat New York to get top 3, or they're going to have to beat either Thieves or Toronto, who they've lost in back-to-back finals, in Major 3 and 4 to get to top 4. So I think for OpTic, unfortunately for me, I think third right now is where I feel like they're going to slot. But here's the thing though. This team is very momentum based, and they can come out and play the way they played at, say, Major 4, and it looks like they're a shoe-in for the grand final, and you never know when you get there. It's just hard for me to predict what to think about Major 5 and the 2 weeks between now and then. If they've sort of cleaned up some of the stuff, I think they can do it. It's just really hard, and I feel like they may have another sort of third or fourth place. They've had too many of these at champs where it's sort of a big what if with their squad. All right, so that's it for OpTic. Let's talk about FaZe. So FaZe in Vanguard got 1,000,000 second places and then got second at champs, and then decided, well, we're going to go ahead and swap out our cities for Slasher. And it's been a pretty good season for the FaZe boys, all things considered, right? Going into Major 3, they make it to losers finals. Okay, not too bad. They pull up to next event and cop a dub. They actually hadn't won in like a year, so that was a big win for them. Since then though, you know, it's been a couple of third places. They probably played like B minus COD. The respawn hasn't been good. Online they've been kind of iffy. I thought Major 5 was the best we've seen them since Major 2. That series went the distance against New York, and they lost 3 searches, surprisingly. But I think going into champs, you got to feel good about where all 3 game modes are. Let's take a look at those stats and talk a little bit more about this team. This is probably one of the weirder stat splits we've seen for one of these contenders. I mean, basically for FaZe, they end the season and respawn just above a 500 team. But the search has been far and away the best to anyone in the league. And I think just to demonstrate this, like here are the overall win splits in S&D this season. New York has now worked themselves in the third at 58%, but you see the gap between them and FaZe. I think when FaZe's respawns have been poor, which has been honestly most of the middle of the season, the S&D has kind of carried them a lot to these third places because they've clutched up a number of series or kind of grind them out in 4 by winning that second map. And they have a couple of maps like they just don't play. Fortress S&D they don't play, but they'll play any other S&D map. They've started to play a little bit more Fortress Hardpoint. My guess is of these maps, maybe Hydra's the one they don't want to play as most. I've noticed they started playing more Fortress, but to be honest, I think where they're at right now is I think they'll play all 5. Maybe Mercado's the one actually now they're kind of a little iffy on. It's just kind of hard to read with FaZe where they're going to try to focus a hardpoint map pool going to this event, but a lot to think about if you're a team based on that because they played all these maps recently. Expo 2 and 3, you might think, okay, well that's a potential opportunity there if you're an opponent. They have looked really good at the Expos they played in Major 5 though, so that's kind of an interesting thought. Going into this event, they look pretty good at that map, and they can kind of avoid playing Hotel Control, which has been sort of a toss-up for them all season. And then matchup wise, you know, they've been pretty good against everybody. 2-1 against Boston. They've had Toronto's number at 5-2. The 0-5 in OpTic is definitely an issue. They have the worst record against OpTic the last 2 years. They probably got like 1 or 2 wins against OpTic the last 2 years. 2-3 against New York. That obviously the fifth matchup being when they played just a week or 2 ago at Major 5. They have a good record against Rocker, although all these series have gone pretty close. You see they've smoked a couple of teams. London won 1 map against them this season. Vegas won 2-5. LAG won 2-2. Seattle 4-2. These were pretty close in the beginning of the season. Not so much since, and we'll talk about it. And then 3-2 in Thieves. Those are always a fun banger. So a couple of bogey teams for FaZe, especially OpTic. But I think they've got a good handle on most of the matchups. So their game mode split's kind of interesting. First off, great game 5 team, 12-5 record in game 5 is great, But you see they've gone there 17 times. So they've had to grind out a couple of these series. They've really had issues sort of in the middle of series, major games 3 and 4, and how some of these have ended up in game 5 because they've lost a couple of like really stupid game 4s this season. So something to kind of look towards when they get to champs. But game 1 and game 2 has been pretty good. And you see if we scroll over to this team, they've got 10 sweeps this season. So when they can win that game 1, they're going to win the game 2 like 3 out of 4 times. And you're probably heading to a sweep at that point. And they've been good in round 11s, by the way. 9 and 7 is pretty solid. 13 and 6, or rather that's in sweeps. They've actually been 6 and 11 in round 5s in control. So just like OpTic, really struggling in the round 5s as well in the game mode. And you see with this team, we look at sort of the online, the LAN splits. I don't think much really changes with the game modes. You see that they're pretty even. Maybe they win a couple more searches on LAN they do online, but like they're still sort of basically floating around 500 as far as the respawn goes. But here's the thing. Like you look at stage 4, right? This was, I think, probably the worst the team looked all season when they probably should have gotten 4th and they got 3rd. Like they just sucked a hard point. Control was not good. They were basically getting in the series by just grinding out S&Ds, like being 5-0 on Hotel S&D. But you see the leap that this team has made in the last stage. Stage 5 stats, we scroll over here. You see that they lost 2 hard points the entire stage. One of those was in the grand finals, and I'm trying to remember when the other one was. Might have been online at some point. S&D surprisingly 6 and 5, but this was 6 and 2 going into that last final series. And the control was pretty good at 7-3. So obviously you want to lose less S&Ds when you get to LAN. I think, again, the 3 in the final definitely skew this a little bit. But this team is kind of firing on all cylinders as far as the game modes go going this event. So I think they got to be up there with your contenders. All right, let's take a look at the stats. So Simp, Celium, Abizi, your featured slayers on this team. I would say MC and Tyler are probably going to be locks for the All-Star team. I mean, MC's having another one of the MC seasons, a 1-2 in basically every game mode. You know, they've started to really kind of, I think, tweak his gameplay throughout the season. As I was playing a little bit slow at times in the beginning of the year, he started to play a lot faster. If we take a look at like stage 5 stats, you see sort of through most of the season, he was at 40.8 engagements at 18.5 deaths. We take a look at the last major here, and you see that he stepped this up quite a bit in terms of his pace, and it hasn't really affected his slaying overall. So that's what you like to see from MC. I mean, Abizi's been insane. I think the craziest Abizi stats is really in search. He has in 65 series, 133 first bloods. I don't think anyone is close to that right now. I think he's probably clear of like 20 or 30 there, but you know, Abizi's been setting pace in the game mode, doing his thing. And has been sort of their featured player in search. But don't sleep on Simp, who's been quietly putting together a great season in search as well. I think really the X factor players on this team, Simp, if they can get Abizi and Simp firing at the same time, this team is extremely hard to beat in all game modes. There's a reason that a sub duo has made it to every champs grand final they've ever been together. That includes Black Ops 4. But I think Austin has definitely at times been sort of up and down. But again, if we take a look at stage 5, major 5, you see that Austin actually had a really good combination of those events. 1.15 overall KD in control, a 1.5. He was their best player in search and destroy during the stage 5, major 5. And then you see a 109 in hardpoint. So Austin has done the classic slasher thing, slow start to the season, and then figures out the end of the season. You best believe that he is going to be ready for champs. All right, taking a look at the bracket. So FaZe will square up against Seattle in their first match. You know, I would have said probably a few months ago, this would have been, you know, a tricky matchup for FaZe. I just don't know what to expect of Seattle coming this event. They've been really weak. And even if you get like Prime Sib, Prime Pred, I just feel like Seattle is still not a favorite to win a game series in game 5. So I think FaZe probably get this one done. It could be sketchy. Remember, all the matchups in Winners Round 1 last year went to game 5. Could see the same thing. And then they got to play either Toronto or Thieves. I would say right now, Toronto probably win that matchup, and then FaZe probably have a very great matchup against Toronto this season, especially in the hard point. So I feel like FaZe have a pretty good path to winners finals. The only thing that get kind of sketchy for FaZe if they drop down 2 losers after winners round 2, they will have to play like probably some combination of like Boston, New York, Rocker, or OpTic. So they're gonna probably have to beat either OpTic or New York to get to top 4. But the thing with FaZe is it's really hard to not see this team make it to winners finals. Again, Simp and Abizi have been gone to probably those 4 champs, and they've made it to the grand final in each one of those. They should be in the conversation to make it to Sunday. Whether they win that grand final, the best of 9, we will see. This team has at times the last 2 years had struggles sort of closing out on the final day in the final match. But I think if you're a FaZe fan, you got to feel good about where they're at going in this event. And I think they're probably one of your key favorites for this tournament to win the whole thing. So yeah, that's my thoughts on champs. I think, to me, the 5 teams I think that have the best chance to win this: FaZe, Toronto, LA Thieves, OpTic, and New York. I think Tracker don't have the slaying power to do it. I think Boston don't have the experience. And I think Seattle is just got too less slaying to really, I think, get this done. Also, they're not a good S&D team. So I think the 5 teams all could definitely win this. And I'm curious in the comments who you guys currently have as your favorite to win this event. Like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more. And as always, guys, we'll see you on the next one.